Hey gang, this is Jenny. Welcome to How to Bird a Bath, the texturing tutorial for 3D assets for Ashes of Tethya. Today we're going to be texturing this bird bath, and we're going to be going over concepts like masking, generators, and the secret sauce of layering, the blur tool. Woo! This tutorial is going to be geared towards using Substance Painter from a beginner's angle, so if you're experienced with Painter, I do apologize that this tutorial might go a little slow. If you have questions after this tutorial, feel free to message me or ask me questions in the next art meeting. I'll be sharing these assets in the Google Drive so you can follow along if you'd like. However, I do recommend watching the video all the way through the first time and then watching it again following along. Let's get started. Alright, strap in. This is my third take of this, so I am sick of it. So, we're going to start with a new project. Our resolution is going to be 1024. We have 3 maps. That means it's going to be a 3K texture. That's not necessary for the game that we're making. However, for the sake of demonstration, we want it to look nice. We're going to use the select button to select our bird bath. We're going to be using PBR Metallic Roughness with Alpha Blend. That'll give us the opacity that we need for the water. I'm going to press OK, bada bing, bada boom. Wow, here we go. I'm going to go to Texture Set Settings over here on the right, scroll down to Mesh Maps. I'm going to bake the Mesh Maps. This is for baking our ID maps, which is something that can be done in Maya, and I'm sure it can be done in Blender. However, I'm really not sure how it's done. There are tutorials for it. I want to be clear that the ID mapping is not required. However, it is useful when wanting to assign materials quickly. Going to bake the selected textures, and it'll be done here in just a moment, and then we're going to move on to texturing the base of the model. We're going to be doing wood and dirt. Bada bing, bada boom. Woo! Alrighty. We're going to be starting with a fill layer just to get the color down, and in case we have any sort of transparency issues, we want to have a nice cover for the bottom, and I did it on the top. My bad. I'm going to be starting with Lambert 3. Fun little fill layer. Nice dark brown. Fantastic. Alrighty, we're going to be moving on to finding the wood. We have a lot of wood options here, but I think we want to start with wood 24, walnut. While it looks okay, there's some gnarly UV seams that we want to get rid of. We're going to go up to the top left and switch it from UV to triplanar projection. That way we get something that looks a little bit more standard and hides the seams just a little bit. However, just so that we're covering our asses a little bit, we're going to switch over to the Smart Materials, and we're going to search up wood again. This will be our introduction to Smart Materials. We have a dry elm wood material. Unlike standard materials over here that have all of the parameters available, we will be looking at a large folder of materials. We can see over here on the right side, we've got a bunch of stuff to look at. So there's a problem here where there's a little bit of wood that's transparent. Unfortunately, this transparency leaks through and just completely nullifies the fill layer. So we got to get rid of it. We're going to scroll down to a thing that says varnish. If you have a problem with the texture, you'll be able to find it by just sorting through all of this. It's not great, but it's better than nothing. And we're just going to get rid of that. Bada bing, bada boom. There we go. In order to make the top layer of wood match the bottom layer of wood, we're going to switch it from UV projection to triplanar projection. Most smart materials, when you're looking through them, will have all of the fun stuff that they have with edgeware, yellow dots, all the scratches and surfaces and the sharpness. But near the bottom, you'll usually find a base material of some sort. In this case, American elm wood. Alrighty. So that's our wood base. We're going to move on to the dirt. This is just going to be layering dirt on top of dirt on top of dirt. These are a lot of these are materials you can find pre-made online. Some of them cost money. I believe Substance Share still works, but I don't know that for a fact. Alrighty. Part of it's just playing around and figuring out what looks good and what you can do without. So we're going to move that back over here. We've got some stylized rock, which might look nice if we add some moss to it. Got some Endor moss here. Wait. There we go. Alrighty, so while it's not similar to the original, this is a nice kind of mossy, rocky surface that we can have. If we want to add more dirt on top of that, we can probably find some dirt somewhere. There's beans, but I don't think we want to add beans. Dirt. Mossy rock. You can put that underneath, and there we go. We've got kind of a grassy, mossy, somewhat rocky surface. We can switch any of these around to get different amounts of each material. Like, for example, if we really just wanted to minimize all 4 of these, and we can focus mostly on the fill layer while keeping the normals of the top 2 layers. Top 3 layers. But since we don't want to do that, we're going to keep it like this. Finally, if we want to add some embellishments, we can add a paint layer on top of this. I have one paintbrush that I like to use all the time, and that's Kyle's Splatter Brushes. I can see if I can link these on the Google Drive. But it's a nice, almost spray paint-like brush. We can change the color from white to a nice green, and give it a little bit of height so it's like there's moss growing. Maybe kind of patch up some of these more brown areas. We can do this with by changing the actual color of the moss materials that we put below, but we want to keep it going. There we go. Look at that. Now, just as a preface, most of this is going to be seen from a very far distance because of the perspective of Ashes of Tethya. So when it comes to doing the finer detail work, we don't need to pay that granular of attention to it. Granted, still make it look good. Alrighty, moving right along. Next, we're going to be working on concrete, conking some crete. This is where analyzing your prop's environment comes into place. So this is a bird bath that exists in a garden. It's not going to be made out of like a super smooth concrete. It's going to be made out of something coarse, something that's like this cast concrete. Not quite. It's a little too smooth. It's giving studio apartment in Los Angeles. Let's go with concrete coarse. That is closer to what we're looking at. Alrighty. So let's change this to triplanar projection to get rid of those nasty seams. We can find them right around, oh, I swear I saw them. There we go. It's not huge, but just for our own sake. There we go. Plus we can change the tiling to 2 if we want it to look a little bit finer of coarseness. Alrighty. We currently have a warmer set concrete. We can change this to a much cooler concrete if we're feeling it. There's literally no end to what we can do with the color selector. I'm going to select a rather cool concrete so we can work on the water, the general water color. Alrighty, this is where the Dirt 3 method comes into play. We're going to add a fill layer in the top right. We're going to add a black mask. Masking is the name of the game in Substance Painter. It's phenomenal. Going to use the magic wand here on the right side to add a fun generator, and we're just going to type dirt, D-I-R-T. Oh, don't forget, in this case, to make the color of your dirt colored. There we go. Alrighty, let's actually go a little bit lighter since we're going to be doing 3 layers of dirt. Now, in order to access the dirt generator after you've created it, don't click on the don't click on the fill layer. You need to click on the mask, and then it will show the dirt modifier. Alrighty. Let's make it so that the dirt level is fairly high, and the dirt contrast level will determine the blending between the rest of the model and the dirt. So the lowest it is, it's very almost translucent, but it's covering a lot of stuff. Now when you raise it up, it looks a lot more blotchy. But we'll be using this to our advantage later on. Excuse me. Alrighty, so we're going to keep this at around, let's call this 0.5. 0.5 for each. Ooh, let's raise that to 0.6. There we go. So we've got a nice spread of dirt and a nice contrast of dirt. we're going to copy and paste this and put this layer below the previous layer. This will be our lighter dirt. And thus we're going to make sure that the dirt amount is higher, but the dirt contrast is lower. Overall, we're just working on dirtying up this once beautiful bird bath. Alright, so we have our lower contrast, higher dirt amount, and now we are going to be doing it again, making it darker and more contrast. With the dirt, a lower dirt level. We're keeping the dirt level the same, and then really cranking the contrast. That way we can pretty much simulate an AO effect, or ambient occlusion effect, with dirt. So that's what we got to define some stuff down here, and we can keep playing around with these values. This is just my process on what I like to do when it comes to starting the dirtying process. We're going to put a folder so that we can keep all of our dirt organized. That way, when working on the rest of this model, we don't really need to go sorting through all of our dirt. We have it all in one nice folder. Okay. Next, we're going to be covering using smart materials in a way that's not really meant for. So let's look up some metal. I like to use this metal worn, or the steel painted worn. Now, it doesn't look good unless you're going for like a kind of a 50s steel bird bath. We're not going for that. We're actually going to be just taking a couple layers from this to ease up on our time and then discarding the rest. So, for paint, we don't need shiny paint. That's just not this. We don't need a rust layer, but we do like the occlusion dirt. This is nice. As for worn paint, we don't need it. There's no paint. Cracks, we want to keep the cracks because they look pretty similar. Alright, and as for metal, get rid of it. Rust occlusion, although it's technically there's no rust in concrete, it still looks good, so we can just kind of lower that down to like 15 or something like that. As for rust stain, get rid of it. This is what the rust occlusion looks like. It's just a little bit of red shadowing with a rust texture. Overall, keep it, don't keep it, not really too much of an issue. Alright, there we go. Next, I want to tell you about the grunge. The grunge is one of my favorite textures because it's stupid. It's really stupid. So, we are going to use the grunge texture, and I'll show you what it is because, again, it's nobody in their right mind should really be using this, but if it works, is it really that stupid? All right. So we're going to import the grunge as a texture map. This will help us later on. And it will import it to this project. All right. So we're going to go back to our layers, add a fill layer. And this is our lovely grunge map. It is a screenshot of Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. I am dead serious when I talk about this. So we're going to use our fill layer and put it as a base color. Whoops, I messed up on that. Excuse me. We're going to be creating the fill layer outside of the steel painted worn. We'll be attaching the grunge map as a base color, and now our fountain is covered in Rick Astley. To stop this from happening, we're going to be putting this to multiply to really work on the shadows, and then lowering the opacity way, way down. Also, we're going to be turning off the roughness, the metalness, and the height mapping on this. We don't need this to be affecting anything besides the color and a little bit of the shadows. Well, it doesn't seem like it adds much. It makes it so that there's a nice subtle marbling in the color, like a little coolness here and a little warmness here. If we crank this all the way back up, look at that, it's Rick Astley. So I'll share this asset as well. I saw that tip on Twitter and it's been life-changing. Alrighty. So now that we have Rick Astley plastered to our bird bath, we're going to move on to adding some fun little details. While we've already worked on adding dust to the model, we want to add some cracks to make the make this thing feel old. So we're going to be going over down here to this little checkered texture named alphas, and we can just look for crack. This one looks good. Cracks, cells. Now we want to turn off all of our color for this, but we want to keep the height on and make it negative height. We're going to turn off roughness and metal. Actually, we'll keep the roughness on. An issue that you might come across when painting in Substance Painter is things not really working unless you're dragging your mouse, in which case we want to do follow path off. Another thing about some brushes is that they'll have size jitter, flow jitter, angle jitter, position jitter. These things will just make it so that the brush has some fun randomness to it if you're looking for that. If not, just turn it off. It's really no big a deal. If you're scared, there's also a restore defaults button down here. Alright, there we go. So we're just going to tell this thing some bad jokes and crack it up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Really go ham with it, but don't worry that it looks a little much right now. We're going to be toning this back with this one simple trick. This is what the rest of the tutorial is going to be focusing on mostly. It's the art of the blur. We're going to add an effect under the filters, under the magic wand, add a filter, and we're going to check blur. By blurring, we can just make the height or the height density seem not as strong, since we don't want to seem like this thing is absolutely shattered, but maybe it's got a few surface cracks that have been patched up here and there. Overall, it's just to add a little bit more character to it. If you want to feel so inclined, you can also add other other decorations to that. Let's say you want to add some gears to it. No one's gonna stop you. You're the creator of your own world. Woo, gears. But we don't really need that for this case. At most, we might need some fun, decals. Yeah, look at that. Sure, let's add a decal. Also, up here on the top right is the symmetry button. This is really good, and there's a symmetry button option for if you're working with a model that's not entirely symmetrical. You can change where it's symmetrizing. Look at that. Lovely little decal. Alrighty. So that's the bird bath. You can change the colors however you want. You can do whatever you want. Yeah, alrighty. Moving right along, we're going to be going to the lily pads. This is where we're going to be discussing masking as well with poly paints. So let's start by adding a fill layer, and we're going to make it a very swampy green. There we go. Ooh, maybe a little more yellowish green. Yeah, that's the good stuff. Alrighty. Going to add a black mask, much like we did with the dirt generators, but we're going to go over here to polygon fill, and this goes on a grayscale from 0 to 1, black being 0, white being 1. We've got 4 options here. We have triangle fill, which paints a vertice. We have polygon fill, which paints a face. We have mesh fill, which paints an entire object, and we have UV chunk fill, which fills in one UV chunk. We're going to be going with the object fill for the lily pads, since our lilies are broken up into several UV maps. Click, click, click. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Alrighty, we want to do something similar for our little flower, so let's go up here, make it some nice pink. Whoops. Black mask. And tap, tap. If you end up making a mistake and, let's say, painting the water pink, you can just scroll back down to 0 and make sure it never existed. Alrighty, and just for good measure, let's paint that one pink as well. Okay. So, now that we have our basic colors, let's work on detailizing. making sure these things have some real fun color to them. So we're going to go back to brushes, click on Kyle's paint splatter. Oh, excuse me. First, we're going to add a black mask again, and we're going to do a similar thing with making sure that all of our lily pads have color on them. That way, when we, are masked in. That way, when we add data, we won't be doing stuff like this. I forgot that you need to add data before you mask. Alrighty. Turn off the height, turn on color, make some real froggy looking colors. Let's take down the roughness on this because these things are wet after all. And we're going to just be splotting on some color. Really go Jackson Pollock on it. We don't need to be clean, nor do we need to really focus too much on the details. These is all going to get blurred out anyways. While we're here, we're going to add the black mask now that we have some data on these. And we're going to click, click, and click. There we go. So now we won't be able to be doing any painting on here without painting on the water. Okie dokie. So we've got some basic green going on, but we want to really make this look like it's alive, like it's growing. We're going to add some almost yellows to it. Further, go a little brighter. Keeping the same vein, we're just going to be putting some spots down here and drawing out some tendrils. This is the fun part of texturing that I like, where it feels like you're kind of drawing with crayons, and that no one is no one is critiquing your work just yet. So you get to have fun and be messy. There we go. 2 more parts of layering left. We're going to be putting in a little bit of almost white in the center. There we go. There we go. And last but not least, we're going to be going back down to the greens and putting on some dark outlines. This part is the one that we want to be ever so slightly careful with, because we don't want to go, bringing a bunch of dark color all throughout the lily pads. We just want this to be on the very edges so that it looks like they're a little bit colder and they're the oldest parts of the lily pad. Alrighty. Now we get to do a little bit of magic by adding a filter here and a blur. Now, it's not a lot at first, but we want to crank the blur on this one. Make it really soft. Just until the point where you can barely make out the details. That you've got this kind of nice, outward, almost pickle-like gradient. You can keep going with it to make it more homogeneous, but I like to just leave the details. Make them a little, just a little too soft. Alrighty. So that is our basic color on the lily pads. Next, we're going to be adding, in a new paint layer, the cracks, the veins. And actually, we're going to be using the same, or a very similar brush to the cement cracks. This will be our sort of de facto veins for the structure for the lily pads. Make sure to change your color back to something a little bit more neutral and not dark. We're going to be applying the height and making sure that the veins are raised. Again, turning off follow path and all the size, angle, and position jitter. There we go. But ooh, we've got the thing going on with it branching out across the water. We'll fix that in just a moment. This doesn't need to be done in any particular order. We just need to, at some point, black mask, polyfill, 1, 2, 3. There we go. And in case these look a little too realistic, animal-like, I don't know. I like to add a ever so slight filter, an ever so slight blur to them, just to soften them up. Just to, oh, excuse me, that's on the mask. Filter, blur, just ever so slightly, since we don't need to be seeing all that ridge. There we go. And there we have it. That is our lilies. You can definitely take a custom brush or just a basic shape brush and spend more time to make everything, you know, the way that you want it. But again, since this is going to be seen from such a far away angle, this should be good enough. Alright, we're getting close to the end, so we only have the water and any extra little detailing left to go. For the water, we're going to start with what all water's made of. Ice. Sort of. You know what I mean. Alrighty. This is a cracked lake ice. And we're going to be changing the color so that it's just a little bit brighter. We don't need to be keeping the everything to be, blue and white, since we're trying to get rid of the snow. Let's make this a little bit brighter. And we'll keep the snow color as a very light blue. What are cracks in the ice now will later become the kind of the caustics of the water. You'll see what I mean soon. So we can turn off the big cracks and we can turn off the small cracks, but we're going to keep these on. However, we want these to... We don't want any roughness on this. None whatsoever. And we don't need any height variation. That way it's all one flat surface and it'll look a lot better as water. So, we also, most important part, need to turn on opacity so we can see through this. After you turn on opacity, things are going to get a little bit darker, so feel free to brighten things up. Alright. Time for our trusty friend, the blur tool. We're going to blur this up. There we go. It's probably for the best to maybe change this around or figure things out. This might take a little bit of finagling, but you know what? That's just part of the process. Alrighty, that's looking pretty good. There's definitely still some things to change. Maybe by bringing the brightness down just a little bit so we can see through a little bit better. Awesome. Okay. That's pretty much all we have for our water. We'll be getting back to this in just a little bit when it comes to the finer details. Lastly, the flower. You know what I was saying about crayons before? This is that ×2. We're going to be just having fun drawing, but this time actually we're going to be using the shape key, this one, which is just a basic round. And we're going to be drawing some flower petals. turning off height and roughness. We don't need that. So now that we have the yellow, which is going to be probably the main transition element in our flower, we're going to be putting down a white stripe. This will be the center and sort of the highlight of the flower. Alrighty. Lastly, we're going to be going here onto the UV map side, and we're going to be selecting a real bright magenta. Just follow along with everything that you see that has the stripe on it, and if it doesn't have the stripe, it really doesn't matter all that much. It's a great time to mention, save your projects. I forgot to save this so far. There we go. Alrighty. Again, we're not trying to be fine artists with this. If you'd like to go more detailed, you're more than welcome to. After all, we do want to be making these things look nice. But don't go crazy in the detail because we're about to blur it. There we go. And the last one. Oh, by the way, Shift will take your cursor from where it last was to where it is in a straight line, and you can just use that to surround your leaves. Awesome. Let's add a filter, blur, and crank this up to the point where, ta-da! We've got a nice highlight from the white, the color from the yellow, and the outside vibrance of the purple. Now, what I was talking about with the polyfill earlier, it's not just for masks. We can also use this for filling in faces with color. So we want to make the center of this a nice kind of orangish yellow. There we go. And let's just do the entire thing. Bada bing, bada boom. Alrighty. There we have our precious little flower. In order to add a little bit of detail, we want to put a new layer down and select dots. No color, but height, and follow path off as well. Oops. There we go. Now, it's not much detail, but it's really all we need for something of this scale. So there we have it. Our water is done, our bird bath is done, and our stand is done. Now we just want to go in and add a few more minor details. With the dirt that we were doing earlier, we can repurpose that same generator to make a kind of a mossy algae thing. Gonna add a black mask and a generator. Dirt. Tone down the dirt level and turn up the contrast to really make it seem like it's kind of growing on the surface and growing all around and underneath the lily pads. Something sort of like that. Now, if we want this to not affect the flower, we just got to bring this down below the fill layer. Oops, the fill layer up actually. There we go. So we have algae on the surface, but nothing around the edges and especially nothing underneath. For that, we can go to the top right, turn off our entire first map. Go down to the second layer where our bird bath is. Paint. Go back to our trusty Kyle brush. Turn it to a dark, swampy green, and just go crazy. Like, yeah, sure. There's a smiley guy down there. And so that the level of the water is not entirely on its own, we can add some algae going all the way around it. There we go. Now if we see underneath the surface, we can see something's growing underneath. We can add this as well in the form of a drippy rust. So fill layer, black mask, and adding a new generator to rust. Now, it doesn't look great. This is this is something you want to add if you really want to mess up your thing and make it look like it's super duper old. In this case, it kind of looks like there's moss growing all over it, or like no one's changed this water in a while. You can turn down the rust spreading or the rust contrast. Overall, though, I think in this case we want to keep a little bit of this nice greenery. There we go. This thing is old, it's rusty, it's dirty, but it's got a pretty flower. Oh, and one final thing at the very bottom. We can add fonts. So if you feel, if you want to sign your work or just add text to something, you can take a font and let's go with, perfect. Put that into the alpha, and you can put bird bath by, you know, your name. And we can make it so that this has no color, but it affects the height of the wood. No roughness, so it doesn't mess up anything that we already have. And of course, follow path off. This is an annoying feature. Whoops. We want to turn off all the angle and flow jitters from the Kyle brushes. There we go. Plus, if you're like me, I like to sign things with a little face. And there you have it. You have just textured a bird bath in Substance Painter. And that's the general process that we want to be using for doing anything with Ashes of Tethya to make it kind of look, you know, the same and look nice. You know what I mean. Alright, if you have any questions about this tutorial or would like me to cover putting assets and textures into Unity, let me know. Either, you know, via direct message or via the next art meeting. Oh, actually, before I go, I'm going to export these textures. You want to choose your directory, in which case I want to go to Ludo Team, Textures, and ignore the previous takes of this tutorial. Beth 3. Select folders, and we will be using Unity Universal Render Pipeline. This one, Metallic Standard. We're going to be exporting in PNG and 8 bits, and it will export Lambert's 1, 2, and 3. Bada bing, bada boom. If we go over to our textures folder, you can see that we have Lambert 1, or excuse me, Lambert 1, Lambert 2, and Lambert 3. Awesome. Well, thank you for following along. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks. Bye.